G'day rugby fans and welcome to Rugby is Mental, episode 4. In this edition, Corne, Francois and I pass around some ideas on how to program performance. Our game was quite a loose one, but we managed to eventually take the ball up the middle by linking the relationship between game philosophy and strategy to setting objectives and building processes, all with the aim of successfully planning your way to performance. Whether as a team or a single teammate, we believe that building processes is essential in a system that aims for high performance. So let's kick off episode 4. I'm Andri Stander and I want you to enjoy the game.
Okay, gents, welcome back to Rugby is Mental. Welcome to everyone that's listening. Andri, you put a very interesting topic on the table today, but you mind just giving us a bit of an intro or telling us how you came across it? What sparked it?
If you don't mind me giving a bit of an extended intro, then I'll tell you where.
I don't think you can do any other kind.
Okay, so what you're saying is I'll talk too much, but it's fine. So I put down building strategy for performance, and the funny thing is I did an honours through UNISA, which was part-time, finance management, and one of my subjects was strategic management. I also had it in my third year and I absolutely didn't find any interest in it. So especially the honours year, which subsequently led to me failing it the first time because I gave very little attention to it. So when I redid it, I said, flip, I'm definitely passing it this time. So I'm going to study properly. And as I went in deeper, I actually found I had a bit of interest in it. In strategy in terms of deciding on where we want to be in the long term. We call it an objective or goals or vision or a why. And how you build your organization to reach that strategy. So there's a lot of views, whether you build a structure and then define a strategy, or whether you decide on a strategy and then build your structure to try and chase a strategy. So it depends on how fixed your structure is and you know how adaptable your strategy is. But long story short, over the last 10 years and especially recently, I've really developed a big interest in how it runs. You know what the processes are behind strategy, especially for building successful performance. So I think that's in a nutshell. We'll obviously paint it a bit deeper now as we discuss the topic.
So you are a coach as well, Corne. So what's your first reaction to an intro like that? How do you build structure or strategies to?
As Andri was speaking, I was just thinking in my head, what's the difference between, say, strategy and philosophy? Because I've been following Michael Gervais into that world of Pete Carroll and the Philadelphia Eagles, and both of them feel strongly about philosophy. What's your philosophy as a person or then as a team? And he was saying if you can't define your philosophy in 20-25 words, then how do you know where you're going? Or where do you want to be? How do you get from that finishing line then to where you are now? So as Andri was speaking, my mind was going there, sort of philosophy and strategy, how those two intertwine. And I reckon your philosophy is how you want to conduct yourself, where you want to be, and then your strategy is how you're going to get there. Does that make sense?
What I hear is that the one is almost the art side, like the vision, the vague sense of what fires your purpose and your why, and your strategy almost relates to tactics. It's how are you going to conduct yourself and your behaviors to get to
and process.
To the philosophy and the process
and the process to get there, to become that person.
Yeah, I read a very good book this year called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And he was very instrumental in Google's success and helping them with how they conducted their strategy. And his whole approach centers on what we call OKRs, objectives and key results. And that all relates to where your starting point is your bigger purpose as an organization or team, whatever it is. And that is, it's not a scientific statement or very strategic, it's more a why statement or a purpose-driven statement of how are you going to better or change the world? What difference are you going to make for the market or for the people in your environment, or it could be for a team. And then you break it down into the different functional areas. So if you're setting OKRs for your personal life, you could have a wider vision statement, and then you divide it into health and wellness and finances and family and relationships and whatever it might be. And then you set specific goals with time frames for each area, and then you break it down into small term goals or habits. And that's where the study of habits and processes and rituals, whatever it might be, comes in. So it encompasses the wider philosophy or the vagueness, as well as the specificity of how to get there. What are you going to do every moment? What do you have control over? And that's essentially your key behaviors.
And you're currently at Western Province Rugby. How do you see those kind of things play out in the organisation? Especially you're especially involved with the under 21s and younger guys, right?
Yeah. So we did an exercise at the end of last year with a document called the Performance Tracker, and it was a tool to help youngsters essentially plan their performance and their success over the next year. So we had them divide their life into a couple of important functional areas. So we gave it to them, and we didn't ask them to give us 4 areas. We essentially made it rugby and conditioning, academic, and I think the last one was lifestyle. So they had to define a vague statement of what they would like to achieve in that specific area. So if it was rugby and you're a fly-off, I've also called it the Google Maps principle. So you look at where you currently are, what your destination is going to be, and then it gives you a couple of different routes. So they had to make that first vision statement based on a Google Maps principle. Where are you currently? So if you are a fly-off, they had to make that statement based on what type of fly-off they are. I mean, some flies are running flies, or like attacking the gain line. Others are much more tactical in their approach, play a bit more of a kicking game. So they had to use that as a starting point, and then write a definition of where they want to end up. What type of fly-off are they going to be if they're going to be successful. Same with a tight head prop, loose head prop, whatever it might be. So you could be a Malcolm Marx hooker, or you could be a Schalk Brits hooker. 2 very different players, different strengths, and they had to be realistic about that. So anyway, so that was their starting point, and then they had to physically break down that performance area into specific outcomes, so which they could measure at the end of the year or at specific times during the year. So if you're going to be a strong scrumming prop, a strong scrumming tight head, you have to think about what are the key requirements for being a strong scrummaging tight head.
So would that be, to use Corne's words, I want to be a strong scrummaging prop? Is that kind of the philosophy side of it, and then go into the strategy to get there? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So you probably not going to write, I want to be a strong scrummaging prop. You want to make it a bit more exciting.
Like?
I want to be known for destroying opposition front rowers in every single game.
Okay. So something that inspires a bit.
Exactly.
Okay.
So at the end of the year, I want to get a contract extension because the coach has remembered me for my ability to absolutely annihilate the opposition loose head. Something like that. Something that inspires. And then you break it down.
Is that what you meant by the philosophy side of it, Corne?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Go.
So that would be for an individual. Obviously, for a team, you can do something else that inspires everyone. But then you've got to break it down into specific measurables with a time frame. So if you want to be a strong scrimmaging tight head, you've obviously got to be strong, and you've got to ask yourself what needs to be strong. So in conditioning terms, we call it the trunk. So the area between almost your belly button and above your knees. encompasses your core, your glutes, your quads, hamstrings, lower back, etc. That needs to be really strong. And that's often an area that's weak when boys leave school because they gym for the beach, so they've got great abs and they've got great biceps. But lower backs are weak, cores weak, glutes are weak, especially from sitting in a classroom. So that would be a starting point. So say, okay, I need to strengthen that area of my body. How do I measure that? And then you start setting up specific targets. If it was, let's say for a wing, you know speed is important. If you've got a current 10 and 30 or 10 and 40 meter time that you measured at the start of the year, you want to build improvements into your process. So you perhaps want to set a target in March and a target in May and a target in October, wherever it might be, which is realistic and achievable. So after your philosophy statement, you want to set specific targets. So I want to run a X second 10 meter by May, and I want to run it 5% faster in October, and so it's specifically measurable at a specific date. Okay, so that's a target that you're working towards. However, our control over reaching targets or goals or outcomes is actually a lot less than we might think. We don't have control over reaching goals. So if you say, I want to win the competition in October, you could be leading until the last couple of seconds and then give away an unlucky drop goal and lose the competition, but you actually had a fantastic campaign. So you shouldn't measure growth by goals. So the most important thing that we try to get across to them is to stay in the process, which is the next thing. So if you've set your targets, your next step, which is your almost the daily doables, is your processes or habits, or I don't want to use one term because certain terms appeal to different people, but we use the word processes. So a process is a specific action at a specific time of day on a specific day that relates to a specific goal. So if I said...
So that's also latching onto the habit idea.
Yes, that latches onto the habit idea.
Right.
So you want to create habits that build towards reaching outcomes, that build towards reaching your strategy or your philosophy.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest system. And the most important part it's often difficult to decide what's more important between philosophy and the habits, because without the philosophy, you almost don't know what you're working towards. You want a target to work towards, but often you don't reach your specific philosophy, you reach a different one, but it ends up being a better one than you hoped for. So what we want to try and get across is that players at least get into good processes. So if you start following good processes within rugby or conditioning, they start spilling over to other areas of life. So if you can find achievement in some of your processes, it inspires you to build processes in other areas of life that you weren't normally good at. So what we did is we had them define processes in each area. So for academics, for example, so if the outcome was to pass all their subjects by the end of the year, you would have obviously specific targets, and so I want to get 70% for business management or 65% for accounting. A process could be to spend 30 minutes after my accounting lecture in the student center just revising my accounting lecture. That's it. So that's the process. So you attach it to a specific time of day. So if accounting is at 10, you say every single day at 11 o'clock for 30 minutes, I'm going to revise the past lecture. It's easy. It's something that you could pull.
That makes it easy to execute because there's clarity in exactly what you want to do, when you want to do it, how long.
Exactly. So the next step, so the last step, is to ask them what keystone habit could be instrumental in affecting everything else. So a keystone habit is one thing or one activity, could be unrelated to anything that you've written above, but one activity will create momentum in getting into the other habits. So
maybe just unpack that more. I know you're referring to Charles Duhigg and the Power
Yes.
Habit, the book. So just maybe explain the keystone habit. How's it different from a regular habit?
So a keystone habit is is a habit that is normally quite simple to get going, or that you are already doing without really thinking about it.
And also triggers other habits, right?
And it triggers other habits. So personally, I've started creating certain keystone habits in my life, and one of which is taking a cold shower before getting dressed in the morning, regardless of the weather. And I've managed to keep it going now for a couple of months through the winter, and it's just amazing how energized it leaves you. When you walk away, get dressed, get in the car, when you get to work, you've still got synapses firing all over the place in your and your nervous system telling you that stuff for you, man, you've just messed me around, but at least I'm awake.
You're awake, yeah.
So you can carry that across to something else. And so what we require of the players is, to set up that keystone habit. And where that's small things such as if one of your processes is to do a 6 o'clock, if you're a flyer, a 6 o'clock session before breakfast, kick 100 balls at posts. A keystone habit could be to put my balls and my boots ready by the door the previous night. So while I'm waiting for my coffee to brew or whatever it is, go and put my stuff ready, because then I know it's there, and get dressed in my training kit. So I sleep in my training shorts and training shirt. Could be a keystone habit. So it's one thing. Cold shower in the morning, or waking up at 5:30. So if
removing all the resistance that
exactly.
to get into the process.
It opens up another topic which is called scripting, which is essentially setting up or scripting or planning for a habit to kick in. So
I want to just latch onto that. What's really interesting about scripting is if you don't have that, and you wake up in the morning, you wanna exercise, you wanna get fit. Now you're waking up and you think, okay, will I go to the gym now, or will I take my bike and go for a ride, 20 kilometers, or will I jog? Or now immediately you sit with a few choices. But if you script, you say you make all those decisions beforehand, and then you just execute the script. I'm gonna run, so I'll have my running shoes, I'll sleep in my training kit. I'll just put them on, I'll go for a 1 kilometer run, and then take my shower. You script it like that. And what I love about that is it takes all the decision making out of it. So you only execute. Because if you try and make those decisions in the moment, that's when you struggle. You find all the resistance, you're thinking, maybe I'll go gym after class or after work or whatever, and then by the time you get there, you don't want to do that.
Yeah. Because one of the biggest detriments to getting into good habits is how you feel, like emotion. So if you say, I'll go and train after work today. If it's you normally sometimes you train in the morning, sometimes over lunch you say, okay, I'll train after work today, and you get to 4:30 and you've had a terrible day and you just don't feel like it. You end up not doing it.
The most effective thing that I've learned or heard about, if you want to learn a new habit, is to just, whether it's a difficult habit or easy habit for you, it's just to attach it to an existing good habit. So if you want to drink more water, for instance, Andri, you will, after your cold shower in the morning, you'll go straight to the bath, to the tap, and drink water. So, and that almost links to what you're saying, that how you feel. If you already have a good existing habit that makes you feel good, attach a new one to the end of it, because you're already in that motion, you feel good.
Yeah.
So that's powerful.
It's funny you asked about the YouTube video. I said I don't normally watch, but I did watch one the other morning. And I can't remember the guy's name now, but he wrote Atomic Habits. And he said something which blew my mind. He said, if you start a good habit that builds towards a successful outcome, let's say it's good money management. So let's say you want to do your budgeting often, you want to do it every single day because it's going to help you to build financial freedom. So if you start doing that habit, even if it's 2 minutes a day, I mean, he was talking about if you're getting a very overweight, unfit person to start gymming, go to the gym for 5 minutes, but you have to leave after 5 minutes. It's more James Clear, that was his name, Atomic Habits. So you at least start doing the activity that relates to the successful person that you picture at the end of that process. So you start associating yourself to what you are going to become. So if you're doing what is required of you to be successful, you start relating, to that successful outcome.
And rather start small, so you're able to do it again tomorrow. It doesn't seem like this massive thing that you want to try and achieve. It's just that small, that 5 minutes or that 1 kilometer or whatever. Okay. Corne, can you maybe unpack some of the things you've learned in terms of the philosophy, strategy, and I mean, you are with Sustry and you work with guys for about 5 months.
Now, what I really liked about what Andri said is that first process of where a player writes down sort of his, obviously what he wants to be, but what he is currently like. That know yourself, that self-awareness.
Yes.
Is the first step to really becoming a good player, in my opinion. Because if you can really be in touch with who you are as a player, you know your strengths, your weaknesses, and you can play to that. If I know I'm an inside centre, might not be the most physical, but I've got good distribution skills. I can adapt my game to that. I can play to that. And that kind of leads to authenticity, because if you know who you are as a person or as a player, that also leads to consistency and being dependable. So that was really intriguing from what he said about being sort of in that process of knowing yourself. And then in terms of building a strategy for performance, I wrote it down, and I think there's definitely a big difference between a school environment and then a professional environment. Because I believe a school environment, you obviously get it year to year, you get a group, and then you have to see what you're dealing with. Where's your strengths and weaknesses, your different personnel.
You mean like you don't really recruit, you get those guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously I know there's some schools that
Yes.
recruit at some different level, but
Yes.
in the general school there'll be grade 9s, and this is your group. You've got a good year or less than a good year. And I think then there it's very important to play towards your players or build your strategy around your players. And when you come to the professional era, then you might be a coach. You coach to a certain philosophy. This is how I believe the game, where the game is going. And then you can go and recruit those type of players. I want a mobile, quick number 8 to speed the game up, or I want a big, stronger number 8 if I want to play a tighter, more set-piece orientated game. But in saying that, I had a fascinating conversation with Jock Ninova. He's the Springbok, obviously, assistant coach, a defensive guy. And when they were at SAS, I can remember asking him a question about how to defend scrum, especially on the blind side, if the opposition can do a 8-9, 8-9-15, 14 or 8-9-14, if you have a biggish blind. How do you defend that? And the two general philosophies is you can put an extra backline player over to that 8-9 side, so maybe your fly off will go over to cover that 8-9, and you have your scrum off covering this side, or you have your 9 jumping in the boot. We say in the boot is just behind the scrum, and he can go both ways.
Yeah.
So I kind of asked him, how would you defend it? And his immediate reply is, who's playing number 8 for me?
Yeah, wow.
Okay. And I was sort of kind of stunned. I mean, what do you mean? So, and then he asked me, well, is Dwayne Vermeulen playing 8 or Warren Whiteley? And then it sort of became clear to me, because if Warren Whiteley plays 8, he feels he's got enough speed to cover that line. But if it's Dwayne, then it might be a bit slower, so then he'll change his strategy. So that was fascinating, and
that's on the highest level.
Exactly.
Recruit.
Yeah. And then you also said, I asked him about sort of the breakdown, your tackle. Do you like chop tackling or sort of double hits kind of thing? And again, he asked, who's your loose forwards? I was like, okay, wait. And then he said, if Van Staden, Brousseau and Quagga is your loosies, geez, then you want to chop, because all of them can steal and compete. But if it's Pieter, Steph, Dwayne, Elstad, geez, then you want to double hit. So that seek and destroy, because of big units impact. So it's just fascinating that even at the top level, yes, you recruit, but then you also play to your strengths. And then there's a lot of, obviously, players that's in form and out of form. So I guess the big takeout is you just need to adapt, really. Have a philosophy, but then be able to adapt.
Wow. So what that says to me is it doesn't really matter what level you are playing. You have to adapt your strategy around the player.
Yeah.
And does that mean then that you have to be, because a player can be in great form or not, and be aware and be in touch with those players to be able to respond to that? No, okay. Either if you are able to swap a guy around, put him on the bench first, bring him on later, when he's not in a good space, do that, but otherwise then work around that.
Yeah.
Brings another dimension to it.
No, I do agree. Maybe loose forward is a interesting talking point. But if you take, say, scrum halves, for example, Rassie definitely has a type of scrum half he likes. The guy is maybe more quick, a runner with the ball, more athletic on defense, more organizer type of player, rather than sort of the old school, I would say, Ruan Pienaar, more strategic kicking scrum half. So, yes, players in form, but definitely a certain type of player he likes in that position. And I say loose forwards is obviously different, because the chemistry between the back three needs to work. Who's your line-out jumper? Who's your... so that might be a bit different to sort of a isolated or individual position. It's interesting.
I want to zoom into that specific area a bit, because I try and do mental skills coaching and try and equip players with the mental skills for performance. And you mentioned Michael Gervais, and he and Pete Carroll, the big focus is relationships. They say football is the outcome, but the focus of this organization is relationships. And I just love that. Meaning that, or why I love it is, if a player, or let me start this way, all of us have that in common. We all have relationships, and relationships affect us in different ways. So if you're married and your relationship with your wife is stable and you're connected and you're communicating and supportive, then that won't be a distraction. You know, you'll be able to focus, and all those outcomes and processes, you'll be able to stay in those processes. It might not affect your performance on the field that much, because you're in the moment and there's a lot of things that grab your attention, you're there. But all the prep work beforehand, all the stuff that gets you in the zone on the field, or helps you to build the muscle or the skill or learn the strategy and all the different calls, that'll be affected by the relationships in your life. So what's interesting for me working with younger players is obviously their parents. The way their parents communicate with them, support them, give them feedback, that comes into play. So if it's all about the game and all about tapping into Carol Dweck's research about growth mindset or fixed mindset, all about you've got the talent or you don't, then they have this belief that I've got the ability And when things go bad, they think maybe I don't. Then that doubt creeps in, and they underperform, and they're not in the zone, and they can't get out of it. You know, obviously, I can imagine you've worked with players like that, and you see like once they're in that state, it's very hard to turn it around. So for me, in terms of strategy and performance, equipping guys to know themselves, to become aware of what are all the factors that's actually influencing the way I talk to myself. Because that's our first relationship, right? It's our relationship with ourselves. So how do I talk to myself when I make a mistake? When I do something that disappoints my coach or my team, I lead the team, how do I talk to myself? Do I go, okay, how did that happen? How can I improve it? What can I work on? Or do I beat myself up? Do I retreat and isolate myself because I feel ashamed that I let the team down? Those kind of things. What are some of the things that you guys noticed that it's kind of a common thing? How do you spot that when you're working with players? Do they have that self-talk that's actually more of a coach, where they know how to coach themselves back into the process, back into the work, back into, right, these are the things that I need to do to become that kind of person and that kind of player, or don't they? You know, do they just like retreat, isolate, backtrack, and you need to pep talk them back into the process and try and keep them in the process?
Okay, so I think the area that you're focusing on is essentially, it's almost a supporting skill to building good processes. So I think that mindset or that view of what to focus on in the moment links back to where you want to end up long term. So if you know that a specific activity, regardless of how small it is, links back to your bigger plan, but you can almost forget about the bigger plan for now and just get into your head that this next step is busy building to that big plan, then you can take away from the pressure of the bigger picture to just get the next action done. So you asked about young players. I want to use an example out of my own life, but I often sort of get sidetracked between tasks, or especially when I get home at night, if I need to get a number of things done, I'll find myself after the first activity lying on the couch with my phone. Just, I don't know how I got there, but it's a great procrastination tool. But I started building in this mental tool, which is literally just 2 words: what next? You know, what am I doing next? Which I have to ask myself when the first task gets done. Otherwise I get sidetracked. So it helps me stay within sort of my evening rituals of getting things done. And I think when it comes back to rugby, when you, especially in pressure moments, what the All Blacks did after choking again in 2007 in the quarterfinal against France. So they famously lost that game after having attacked the French 22 and goal line for like 10 or 15 minutes without even trying to drop goal once. Because the pressure of making a mistake in that area was just so much. One of the tools they built in for the 2011 World Cup with the help of Gilbert Inorca was to center themselves again. So I can't remember the exact term, but I think part of the terminology they used was to get back to
Blue zone.
Back to blue zone.
Yes, blue zone.
And each player had their own specific process for how to get there, or activity.
I think actually
In a
blue
big-
state.
Blue state,
Something.
yes. Anyways, but it was just to ground themselves again. So if you are in a big moment, you're defending a scrum on your own line, you're under pressure, you don't know what's going to happen, you had to trigger that action or that process that gets you grounded to being back in the moment. And a lot of people use the tool of seeing themselves from a bird's eye view. So they actually remove themselves out of their own body and sort of picture themselves from above or from a different point of view to say, okay, that's me, that's why I am. It's actually not so bad. I'm bigger than this. Some of the players had to find, during their warm-up, they find focus zones around the field, which they would use as their grounding tool again. So some guys might have the top of a flagpole with the New Zealand flag on it. Another player might have the intersection of the 22 and the touchline where there's a advertising board for Jimmy's Killer Prawns, whatever it might be. So that's my grounding zone. So if it's getting rough around me, if it's getting tough, say, okay, find that space. You actually focus on that point to say, okay, I'm in the moment again, it's fine. It's actually okay. The moment's not that big. I can remove myself from it. I can get back to it. Now what's the next thing I need to do? Is it to hook the ball? Is it to find my line-out jumper? And finding my line-out jumper is as easy as, okay, I just need to get my spacing right, get in the zone and get the ball in without thinking about the activity too much.
I played, just sorry for interrupting, I played with Robert Eberson at the Cheetahs. I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
Robert. He had this thing where he looked up into to the sky. And at first I didn't know why or what, and after asking him about it, it was basically that. Because he said, or during the day, so if something bad might have happened, missed a tackle, it's chaos, he'll look up and it's just like a clear sky. And then he'll imagine his mind goes clear like that. And then he goes, okay, next job, what do I need to do now?
Reset.
Yeah, kind of a grounding reset thing.
So those are the kind of things that I think is part of the relationship we have with ourselves. Knowing that self-awareness that you touched on. Knowing yourself, understanding yourself, and knowing how to get yourself from, they call it red to blue. From being in a panic state, distracted, worried about the scoreboard, to in the moment, focused on my job. These are the things that I can control. And I have to give them my full attention. Because if you're worried about the scoreboard or the mistake you just made, you're not present. Your mind's still either in the past or in the future where you think we're going to lose the game. So those things help you stay present. I think that's actually a relationship skill. A relationship with yourself, but also being present with other people. It's kind of it's the same, boils down to the same thing. And without presence, without being totally in a moment, I don't think it's possible to perform your best because your mind's not in it. You're not totally in that moment. Some players, I think, only get in that moment when the pressure's high. Seems they don't really switch on until they feel that. So if you know that about yourself, how can you create that drive, that pressure, even when it's not high stake? How can you get into that zone to give your best? Other players, when the pressure is high, they retreat or withdraw a bit and hesitate, don't want to carry the ball or whatever. They hide. If you know that about yourself, and you're aware of that, then you can set goals and help yourself carry the ball more in that moment. Help yourself to be fully present in those moments, make different decisions, ask coaches to help you spot opportunities that you can actually get into the game when you find yourself hiding. So, in terms of performance, I think that's a big thing. Self-knowledge, self-awareness, and self-talk.
And I think what you said now just almost brings everything together just a little bit, because we've been talking about strategy and planning for performance and goals and outcomes and mental and etc. But at the end of the day, if you don't build a system which brings you to the starting point of processes, you don't know what the important things are to focus on. So in the high pressure moment, you've also got to know what your important processes are for your position and for your role in the team. So when it gets high pressure and and you need to get to a situation where you ask yourself, okay, what's next? It's got to be something familiar, something you've always done. So Richie McCaw wrote he had black cardboard journals, which he made notes in every day, and after each game, and after a game on a Monday morning or Sunday evening, wherever, he would just write at the top, begin again. So he knew where to start, and he knew where every single week's build-up started. And that was his trigger to write to begin again. So to get into your head that everything is something that you can program ahead. If you don't know what processes makes up your programs, then you're essentially lost. And that's when pressure becomes too difficult to bear, is if you don't know what your physical next activity is. Because as an athlete, you've actually got every skill and ability you need for that moment. The problem is when there's pressure, not every athlete knows how to apply it in that moment, because they often get fixated on the things that cause the pressure. So they almost forget, and then they start worrying about small things.
Or things out of their control, like being distracted by the ref.
Exactly.
Once you made the call, you have no control over that, but you do have control over your processes, your job, whatever it is.
Well, essentially that's what a goal kicker does, or a guy that throws into the line-out hooker. He's got his routine, because that's what he does every time. That's where he feels safe. And there's certain trigger points. He goes to that space where he's comfortable with. He did it a million times. So
and
that's what it is.
And the irony about that is their trigger points would very seldom focus too much on their technique, because if you overthink technique too much, you almost lose your natural inclination to just do it. And you start worrying about, do I lean to the left, do I lean, it's like a golf swing. So in Tin Cup, I don't know how many of you have watched Tin Cup, when he goes onto the driving range before the US Open, he hits the ball all over the place. Because he's overthinking performance in the US Open.
You're gonna die, clown.
Yeah. And then, I think, anyway, I prefer Tin Cup. I like the more serious version. And then his caddy tells him, okay, put your hat on backwards. He puts his hat backwards. He said, okay, put a golf tee behind your left ear. And he puts it behind his ear. He said, okay, stand on one leg. And he makes him do stupid things, and when he swings, he hits it perfectly. He said, why did I get it nice? I said, because you weren't worried about your swing. You just swung the club.
Yeah, I heard the definition of mastery is to be totally present in the moment. So when you're executing the skill, you're totally present. It might be like flow, we talked about in a previous episode, and then the intervention takes place between the moments. So after the skill, then you reflect, you think, okay, I did that, but then again, when you're in the process, you're fully present again.
I like that word intervention. That's where you get the coaching, the training,
feedback, the loop.
Yes.
So I've got as a bit more experienced coach, Corne, there are always things that you almost can't plan for rugby-wise. I mean, there's a lot that you put on your in your notebook at the start of the year. How do you want to defend? What's your mapping? What type of shape you're going to play, etc., etc. But is there a space, and is it ever considered that these things do play a role, and how do you incorporate it in the way that you train and approach your strategy? Talking about planning outcomes, building processes or habits into it, and how would it relate to the specifics of rugby?
I don't know if you heard about John Mitchell calls it WTP. He loves his acronyms, and it's a weekly tactical periodization. So it's a term they got from soccer, which Mourinho got from some doctor in Portugal. What it basically means is you take a tactical aspect of the game, say it's the contact collision part, and then the idea is you want to expose your team or the players to the contact collision side of the game in practice, but at a higher intensity than the game. So you take an aspect of the game to the training, because you can't go every day cover all the aspects at a game intensity or intensity above. And if you stay on the theme of collisions or contact work, you kind of build the mentality into that day's or that day's training as well. So say Tuesday you want to do your collision work, and they said the highest that was ever measured was Richie McCord did 7 collisions in a minute. So he went tackle, up, counter ruck, ball spilled loose, carried, offload, clean. So 7 collisions in a minute. So ideally you then want to expose your player to 8 collisions a minute. But in a short, like whatever ball in play is these days, in 30 minutes, whatever, you break it down. So, and then you design your drills that you have somewhere in your training session on that Tuesday, you will have 8 collisions a minute. And then within that tactical game aspect, you need to build in the mental aspect as well. So you might do 22 defense. So you're on your try line, that's siege mentality. We don't give them an inch. You defend the pick and go. So you kind of incorporate that mentality with the focus of the day. Whereas you might move to your what people call faster day. The typical other big day is then your typical Super Rugby game back will do 90 meters a minute during that ball in play of 40 minutes. So then you want to expose your players to drills or exercises where you run 100 meters a minute. So faster than game pace. But then obviously you take out the contact. So you do everything fast paced. And then again, the mentality of being more expansive, looking for opportunities, more alert, communication.
So the great thing about what you mentioned is there were elements of philosophy and strategy in there. There were elements of goals or outcomes that you can measure, 90 meters versus 100 meters.
Yes.
And elements of process.
Yeah.
So,
but I think the biggest part then for as a coach is what you're doing is you're installing belief.
I'm able to do better or at a higher pace than the game actually requires.
And Mickey Arthur had this philosophy as to sort of in the nets facing the bowling machine. Why would you, if you're going to face Shoaib Akhtar at 148 kilometers an hour, why would you put the bowling machine at 138? Why not? So you're surely going to put it higher. You're going to train at a higher speed, just to give that confidence. And I think that's what you need to install that belief in your players, whether it's through what you say to them or them doing it over and over. If they can defend their own try line 5 times in a row with this mentality, this trigger points in a game, they have the belief of they can do it. And then
it feels familiar as well.
And then with the certain individuals, you have to maybe be in somebody's ear a bit more. See, you've been working hard this week on this. I believe you'll be all right this weekend. It's sort of small. Some players you need to say, well, listen, you've been slacking this week.
So then that's all about programming controllables at the end. And repeating it. Perfect practice. So you mentioned cutting out things that are uncontrollable. So whenever I've got a team that I coach, our philosophy is the referee is always right, even if he's wrong. So it's fixed. And if a player back chats a ref, we take him off. I'm at a younger side at a school at the moment, so it's easy to take them off because coaches are always right, even if they're wrong. So it's amazing what you can get done building towards performance and getting strategy right. Is if you try and program as much as you can that is controllable, and then just doing it over and over and over again.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Wow.
That was insightful.
It almost felt like we were in the moment because there was an hour that's gone by and I'm not sure what happened.
That's flow, man.
That's
well
cool.
done. So what we'll do for you who's listening, we'll put some of the links of the books and the people we mentioned for you in there, so you can go and check them out, like Michael and Pete and whoever. And Andri, will it be possible maybe to that document? Is it something you can share? Can we put a link to that on there as well?
Yeah, of course.
Just the steps. All right. Thanks. See you guys next time.